Welcome back to another episode of Meet the Makers. We have Jack from Twin Shepherd Printing. You know him from his printers, from his dogs. Super excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us for another episode.
Absolutely. I'm excited and a little bit nervous to be here, but I'm having fun.
No need to be nervous. It's going to be chill, but I'll kick you off the same way I kick everybody off. How did you get into 3D printing and making things?
I grew up in a nerdy household. My dad was in the Navy, so he spent a lot of time away from home, and he would come back, and it was always like trips to the movies, trips to the Lego store, building Lego sets. I have one of the original Millennium Falcon sets somewhere around here that we put together. So I've always been really into putting stuff together and just being imaginative and going off into La Land. And what got me into 3D printing is a friend of mine had two Ender 3v2s, and I hear it all the time on your podcast of everybody starting with Enders. And I started the exact same place, and he was moving and had to get rid of one, and I ended up getting one of his Enders off of him and sat there and pulled my hair out as I replaced most of the parts on that because I just kept breaking it. But it got me hooked, being able to go, for the first time I can take something that I'm thinking of, and I'm like, I want that, and then just make it.
It's funny you mentioning like everybody on here starts on Enders, and likewise, I started on an Ender, and it sounds like we have a similar experience of ripping our hair out every day with our Enders. But I was wondering if this podcast went on for 2-3 more years from now, if I would ask that question in 2-3 years, people are going to be like, oh yeah, I started on an A1. I feel like it's evolving now. A lot of people are getting into the hobby, but not necessarily starting on one of those machines where you do rip your hair out every single time that you use it. But for you now, do you still have the Enders in your collection of printers today, or what are you running for your printers?
That Ender actually belongs to my brother now, and it was more of I needed space, and when I looked at the printers that I have now that were moving into that space, and then that Ender, it was like, sorry, buddy, you're first on the chopping block.
Yes.
My brother still asks me for help with tuning it and things like that, because that bug's never bitten him, so every now and then I get to go relive the working on it and trying to troubleshoot, and I just look at it and like, oh, that's why I got rid of you. But right now, I have a Bamboo X1 with 2 AMS units. I have an A1 and an A1 Mini. And then if anybody's watched my channel, they are very aware of my V400 because I'm very proud of that machine and the modifications and stuff that I've done to it.
Yeah, the V400, I don't know that anybody else I've talked to so far has had one of those. Maybe they have, but you're the one who I see it the most in the content, and I don't hear a ton of people talk about them. Just for maybe anybody who's listening who's not familiar with what that is, can you talk us through?
Yeah. So the V400 is a Delta style printer, and I had actually made a video a while back where Josh, also known as Dork Vader, had left that exact same comment on one of my videos. And I did a big deep dive into it and tried to explain, but without ever looking at one, it's really hard to explain because you're like, yeah, it's a 3D printer, but all 3 motors are facing the same direction. And it's like, what? They're not super popular, which makes me cry a little bit because they're great machines. They're very sturdy. They don't vibrate a lot. So I'll walk in there and my X1's sitting there shaking the table and my A1's shaking the table. But if the V400's running, it doesn't vibrate or really make that much noise. But as far as they're fast, they give good print quality. They're fun and amazing to sit there and watch them work as they're zipping away, but I don't know why people just don't like them as much, or they like them and just don't want to pay for them, which is my theory.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do think that can be a big part of it. I think also just in the last couple of years, the Bamboos have gotten so much just attention pushed towards them that I feel like it's the place that so many people just go to by default. But I can't remember whose content it was that I was watching back. I've been 3D printing for about 2 years now, and I remember right before I got my printers, I was just exploring and seeing videos about printers. And I saw a Delta printer at the time, and I was so interested. It looks like, compared to everything else, it looked super fast. It was way different from how everything else was set up. It's interesting hearing you say that it doesn't vibrate as much, because when I watch those printers go, to me, they look like they're super violent in the way that they move. I guess for you, that's not, using in practice, not something that you're experiencing.
No, so especially on the V400 and similar Delta printers, they're heavy. I took that to 3D Printopia last week or a week and a half ago, and I put it in the back of my Jeep and drove 9 hours to meet up with the friend I was staying with for that event. And that is not an easy printer to travel with because those things weigh anywhere from 60 to 80 pounds, depending on which
Wow.
one you get. So even though they're very violent, it's not a lot of its overall weight that it's throwing around.
Okay. That makes sense. I'm trying to like reason out how much my P1P weighs. I've moved like 5 times in the last couple of years. So I feel like I've moved it so many times. And it's a pretty heavy printer when I move it, but I don't think it's 60 to 80 pounds heavy. Looking at it again for like people who aren't familiar, hopefully you're watching the video version. I'll put like images in here of what it looks like. In terms of what the build volume on that looks like, can you build all the way up to that build plate, or is there a shorter height limit that I'm imagining on those?
So that is one thing that it tends to be a conversation point in a lot of comment sections with companies like Flsun, which make the V400 and other Deltas. That's what they're known for, is the advertised build volume that they give people versus the actual build volume.
Yeah.
So like the V400, they say it's 300 millimeters wide and then about 410 tall. But when you look at it and you know how those motors move, once you get up to about 380 millimeters, the actual arms that are holding the print head can't move as far, so it becomes a cone. It's big enough to print helmets because I've printed some helmets with it that fit my big ol' head. It's got some size to it, but you do have to be a little careful when you're trying to max out the actual build height on it. I did a prop hammer from World of Warcraft, and I got lucky that even though it hit the maximum build height, it was right there in the center so that it could actually finish, because otherwise I don't know what it would have done.
I feel like that's the next video that we want to see from you, is just maxing out that build plate to see what happens.
But way over to
It's
the
not-
left.
Yeah, but it's not going to work. Yeah, now I'm curious. No, it's interesting though, because yeah, when I was watching your videos leading up to this, like I said, I have no experience with those printers. So I was trying to piece together how that would work. But now hearing you talk through that, that makes sense. With that printer, how is like the maintenance on it? How is just like the overall experience of owning that compared to other printers that you've had?
It's not been terrible. I did snap a belt on it, which was probably my fault. I knew what I was doing, but overall, it's been a pretty good printer. I know that Deltas can be something that can either be daunting because there's a lot to them and a little bit of learning curve knowing how they work in case you have to troubleshoot something. And I have my own personal opinions about some of the Delta manufacturers and their quality control, but the hardware is solid as long as you understand how the machine works and you don't create a situation where a failure can happen. That's been ridiculously reliable. Overall, I've probably put about 3,000 print hours on that machine. I lost official count because I've had to reset the firmware a couple times because
no.
I broke something, but the last time I reset it, I was at 1,700, and that was after about 6 months of owning it.
Okay. Wow. How long have you been 3D printing in general now?
As of August, only a year.
Wow. Okay. It's always so crazy to hear people who believe in printing. I've only been printing for 2 years myself, but again, watching your content, you seem very comfortable in everything that you do. So that's cool to hear it. Now, for you earlier, you briefly mentioned going to, I think it was previously called the Eastern Rocky Mountain.
Eastern Reprap Festival.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now it's Printopia, I believe.
They rebranded.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been seeing videos of it and it looks like it was a pretty crazy event. How was your experience there?
So I went to both MRF, which is Midwest Rap Fest in Goshen, Indiana. We don't talk about that one. And then I went to 3D Printopia. And the reason I end up at both of those events is I work very closely with a filament brand, New Makers. And it started with I was doing some TikTok content and stuff for them and becoming a customer. And then Paul Rice, their director, is now actually a very close friend of mine. It's who I went to go stay with for 3D Printopia, and they've been attending those events. So we get there and we realized our booth was so much smaller than what we were expecting. And they looked at me because I knew a bunch of the creators that were there. Asylum Life was there. Try Not to Break Anything was there. Courtney from Filament Stories was there. Joel Telling was walking around a little bit throughout the weekend, and they just looked at me and they were like, "Go socialize, get out of here." I was like, okay. So for me, it went very well. I got to meet a bunch of people that I've only ever known online or just haven't been able to talk to, and now they follow me and like we text back and forth and stuff. And for New Makers, it went good. They paid for the event and on the first day, so it was fun seeing people that I saw at Murph and catching up. It was fun meeting new people, and it was fun seeing people.
For people who have never gone, it sounds like you have a little bit of a taste of what's more like on the vendor side and an attendee side. For somebody who's never been to one, when you go to these events, what's the structure of them and how would you maybe describe it to somebody who's never been there before?
Depending on the time of day, it can sometimes be just all of the vendors hanging out, but there were a ton of people, especially on the second day that it was open, that the general public really flooded in. It's just a ton of introverts that are given a space where it's safe to come out of their shells and talk to other nerds in the 3D printing space and see cool stuff. And if anybody ever goes to these events, because I plan on attending Rocky Mountain and they see me and they just want a hug, they can go, Jack, and throw their arms out. And I promise you, I will give you a hug. But overall, it's like Comic-Con. It's a place for you to go and be a nerd and nobody's going to judge you or think that you're weird. They're probably going to get just as hype as you are about what weird little niche thing you're into.
Yeah, no, it's every interaction I've seen of people going to those shows, they always look like a bunch of fun. Every year I say I'm going to do Rocky Mountain and every year I back out last minute, but I think
will you
this
go to
year I'm
Rocky
gonna go.
Mountain if you see me and I give you a big ol' hug?
It's a hard maybe. It's a hard maybe because I've said yes other years and I back out. But no, it does look like they're super fun events. So I would encourage myself probably and everybody else watching this if
They're
you're
a blast,
on the
yes.
fence to go. Yeah, for sure. Now, a couple weeks back, maybe it was even longer, man, time flies, but I had been working on a project. I was using this shitty set of calipers, and you had made a recommendation for a better set of calipers, which I will admit I am still yet to get, but I project finished today that I need them again for, so maybe I'll place an order. But for you, are there any other tools outside of that that maybe for somebody, either they're just getting into 3D printing or maybe they're looking to kind of scale up their non-3D printer tools for 3D printing that you might recommend that they get?
The best tools that you have are the ones that you already have. And I know I came at you sideways with the caliper video, but I saw that and was like, a video idea. But as far as the best tools, if you had to buy, I would say 2. Get a good deburring tool so that whenever you were trying to take brims and things like that off of your prints, those, I don't know why the blades stay sharp continuously, but that is one of my favorite tools. And then get the no clogger or something like that. I've had a no clogger since before I really started seeing the ads and everything. And are you reaching into a drawer to grab one?
I was trying to grab. I was like so confident I was going to grab it, but oh, here it is. We got it. Yeah.
The number of times that has saved my butt and saved a nozzle, especially for new people that are going to make mistakes and they may end up putting PETG in their nozzle at PLA temperatures. Gosh, I ruined a bamboo nozzle because 3 prints in a row I went TPU, PETG, PLA carbon fiber, and that nozzle was wrecked. And so I used my no clogger and I sat there and I very gently just kept packing new filament in it until it came out that color. And I was like, okay, we're good. And it worked.
It's such like a dumb, simple tool, but the number of times that this thing has just saved me from catastrophic failures. Yeah, I highly recommend this for anybody out there who doesn't have one and needs this. Great tool. Deburring tools too, though. Honestly, super underrated. They never go dull. And if you're like me, I love laying down brooms under, especially like my wider prints. I can't go without those. So,
Everybody says it's a crutch, but anytime I'm looking at something, I am willing to spend the extra 3 grams of plastic it's going to take to lay down a brim and make sure it actually prints, because I'd rather constantly waste plastic on a brim rather than have a failed print because a draft hit a printer at the wrong time.
No, I think it's so much. I'm almost like scarred from printing on my unders. My one under, it had a bit of a warp cut from the day that I had gotten it. And I would always have issues with the bottom wouldn't be flat. It was lifting, it was curling. And ever since then, I became a brim person. And like you said, there's people out there who will say it's a crutch, but man,
that ender trauma is real.
Fine. Yeah, it sounds like you run quite a bit of different filament through your printers. I've never run carbon fiber. How was your experience with doing that?
I do run a ton of different filament. 1 minute I'm printing ABS and ASA. I am currently talking to Tech, which is a filament company owned by P.O. Poly, because I got to meet Mark, their owner, at 3D Printopia, and they're sending me some of their ASA glass filled. I do multicolor prints with silk and mattes, and my nozzles hate me. They always want to leave. But overall, everything is a learning curve, but nothing is impossible. I've met a bunch of people that they're getting started and they have an A1 and the only filament they've ever printed with is bamboo filament that they bought, and it just pre-programs everything and everything's easy. As far as that goes, there's nothing wrong with it, but I am constantly encouraging people to go ahead and find something interesting, find a reason to buy that filament off of Amazon or from a vendor, or take some from a friend when they're not looking
Yeah.
and print with it. Because the worst that's going to happen is you have to change a nozzle or you
Yeah.
have to unclog something. It's not going to make the printer blow up most of the time. But and that's how I learned, was by either messing up or getting it right the first time and never changing anything about how I did it. I get stuck in my ways because it works. But Josh Dork Vader had in our group chat mentioned making a frying pan out of TPU, and he was like, I don't think he's ever printed with TPU, and he was like, that's such a good idea because you could hit people with it. It wouldn't hurt. And I'm like, I'm stealing that. I have black TPU. It's on one of my printers right now.
That's such a Josh idea to have, but it is true what you're saying. I do that of just going out of your way to either buy or try different types of filament. I'm notorious for being somebody who I'll go 6 months of only printing PLA, but this last week I've been experimenting with all types of different ways of laying down different support materials. So I tried breakaway support filament for the first time, and then I also tried PBA for the first time. And they were like, all unique experiences. I tried using PETG as supports, and it wasn't necessarily something that I probably would do every single print that I laid down, but I learned a lot from doing it. And it's been just one of those things, not that I fall out of love with 3D printing, but sometimes when you're just laying down a PLA print and you're using a bamboo and it's just easy, it can get boring after a while. So I think sometimes bringing back those things that can give you a little bit of a challenge or just make you do something new, I find that to be fun and exciting.
Yep. Every now and then, if you go look at the video where I did the CPAP mod on my V400, there's a model for the ductwork on it. And it's a very interesting model to try to put on your build plate and it either not look ugly or have support scarring. And because I have an enclosure on my V400, I was like, no, I'm going to print that out of ASA so it never warps and it never has problems. So it had the least amount of surface area possible, just because if it worked, it was going to turn out the best it could, and then hit print and went to bed. And I woke up the next morning and it was perfectly done. And I went, that'll work.
Yeah, waking up the next morning, it being perfectly done was not how I was expecting that story to end, because typically in those scenarios when I like roll the dice and press play and go to bed, normally that is not how it ends up for me.
That is what I have is the best mindset for people to have, is just to get over that initial fear, get over the, what if I can't do it? What if this goes wrong? And just be like, you know what? We do it live. Let's see what happens. And then just let it do what it's going to do, because either it's going to work or it's not, and you'll learn from it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, to press you a little more on filaments with enclosures, I've never had a printer with an enclosure ever before until last week. I just got the Snapmaker Artisan. It's got this huge enclosure. It's opened up a whole new possibility of worlds of like different filament that I can use. I know you have experience using ASA, but how has your experience done with those? And have you done vapor smoothing on those, or what's just like that process been like?
I've not done vapor smoothing, and part of that is just because every time I go to actually buy the stuff that I need for vapor smoothing, it's my ADHD goes, oh, look, a squirrel. Research is good, just the pros and the cons to them, what they can do, know the risks, because those materials like ABS, nylon, ASA do have volatile organic compounds that they off-gas, so you want to make sure that you are taking precautions to make sure that they aren't affecting your health or the health of your pets or your family members in the house, and be responsible with it. But between ABS and ASA is usually the one I tell people to go with. Spend the extra couple bucks that it takes to buy a spool of it, because it tends to print a lot easier and it doesn't smell as bad when you walk by your printer and you catch a whiff and you're like, oh, that's spicy. I'm not super familiar with the Snapmaker. I think I saw it on your channel.
It's like a 3-in-1 machine.
Yeah, I don't think that one would have any issue printing it. Do what I would do. Buy a roll and see what happens.
Yeah, that's definitely on my agenda in the next couple of weeks. I think I'm going to keep experimenting with filament, and we're going to go down that journey. You mentioned in there the safety of your pets. I'm assuming that twin shepherd printing comes from your two shepherds.
Yeah, the name definitely has a very sentimental value to me. I have 2 German shepherds. The one that's laying over my shoulder right now is Zeus, and then my other shepherd is laying over here. His name is Cassian, which if you're a Star Wars fan or a Court of Thorns and Roses fan, that name will ring a bell to you. They came from the same litter. I didn't get them at the same time. I had originally just adopted Cassian as a little 6-week-old puppy, About 10 months after getting him, we found out that Zeus, over here behind me, needed to be rehomed because his owner passed away. And so we reached out and we're like, hey, we'll take him. They're the best of friends. They definitely know how to keep me young, is a nice way to put it. But whenever I was coming up with a channel name and just trying to find, hey, what's going to be my identity? What's going to be my
Yeah.
basically Bensky or
Yeah.
Misfit printing? And I sat there and it probably took me a week to figure out what my channel name was going to be. And then that just struck me out of nowhere. And I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now, I don't know, did you, when you first got into 3D printing, I know you've only been doing it for a year, were they puppies at all or were they like full grown dogs at that point?
they were technically puppies. They were only a couple months old. So
Okay.
they're 2.5 now. So I've had
Okay.
them before I started 3D printing, but they were still young.
Okay. I don't have any pets currently, but I've been exploring the idea of getting some pets and I'm curious how I might have to pet proof my house. Have you ever had any run-ins with doing anything crazy with your 3D printers or are they pretty good around them?
The cats are the ones that'll really mess up your 3D
Yeah.
printers. The dogs could not care less. The cats definitely are like, "Oh, that's
They're a
warm.
little more
I'm gonna go
curious.
sit on that." So I strategically, my X1 sits on my workstation, and in some of my videos you can see it, but the box that the X1 came in sits right below it. And I had designed and 3D printed a poop chute extender for the X1 that goes behind the table it's sitting on and just dumps
Okay.
everything in that box. So I don't have to worry about it for a couple months, but it doesn't always hit the box, and so I usually find the cats chasing around little filament poops on the floor and stuff like that.
Yeah, I could see the filament shooting out of there being like a highly engaging activity for a cat. As you were talking about that, I almost wonder, I feel like in a weird way, maybe the poop might be some sort of litter box type enticing situation for them, but hopefully nobody's ever run into that problem before.
I can't imagine that and plastic will smell good. I'll stick with what I buy.
Now, before we got talking today, I think you said that you've been prepping for some upcoming shows that you're going to be doing.
Yes, so I have on the 26th, I think, 2 weeks from now, I'm attending my first farmer's market here in a city that I live next door to, Johnson City, Tennessee. And me and my girlfriend go to the farmer's market all the time because it's not just, oh, tomatoes and
Yeah.
corn and stuff like that, but they do like art vendors and people that are doing like custom blown glass or
Yeah.
wood etching, I think is what it's called with the laser. And so we reached out to them, hey, we're interested. And they reached back and they were like, hey, that sounds super cool. So I've been slowly filling up 4 large, like Walmart cargo containers with
Yeah.
prints and things and not trying to make a ton of money or anything. It was just like, oh, that gives me an excuse to not have my printer sitting still and maybe I get a
Yeah.
little bit of extra money on the side. I live in a part of the country where everybody's very much, they like going to those events and meeting new people and hanging out. And even though it's called Johnson City, it's a very small town vibe. And I'm excited.
I'm always curious, especially for you doing this for the first time, going to a show like this. How do you decide? There's so many different prints that you could make. How do you decide what to bring and what not to bring to a show like that?
I have the worst way of deciding stuff like that because people will be like, how do you price those? And I'm like, it used this much filament and it took this much time. Yeah, that feels like a 15 right there. 15 if it doesn't sell, maybe a 12. Like
Yeah.
everybody's got these algorithms and these way of doing things. I have the most southern way of doing it. I'll do that for 20. But I print stuff that I like. I print stuff that I think would be cool. I think my friends would think would be cool. And I'm just bringing a little bit of everything and seeing what sticks. If you checked in with me in December, I'd probably tell
Yeah.
you, yeah, don't do that. But it's just a mixture of a lot of smaller businesses and like one-off mom and pop artsy businesses because even though we're in East Tennessee and everybody thinks that we're all red voting hillbillies,
Yeah.
there's a lot of younger people that live in this region. There's a lot of very, I don't know how to put it, but there's a bunch of crystal shops in the area and stuff. So it
Okay.
gives you the vibe. There's a bunch of microbreweries. So it's
Yeah.
what would they think is cool because it's probably what I also think is cool.
I would have a similar philosophy for you. I see these people and they're like yeah, based on this algorithm that I've run and I've run it through AI, this is exactly how this should be
By
priced.
my
So what you guys,
calculations.
yeah, I'm like, oh, this feels like a $10. No, that I would be in the same camp as you. Now, I'm sure your printers have been busy with just stuff prepping for that show. For you, outside of prep for that, has there been any projects that you have been working on that are just like maybe outside of the box or different from what you normally run?
As far as what the past couple weeks have looked like, it went printing for the market and then printing stuff to have on display for 3D Printopia and then back. And I immediately, Asylum Life, Brady, and Bensky were all like immediately on board with the 3D print cares for Hurricane Helene
Yeah.
and trying to get toys together to donate to shelters that have a bunch of kids that were lost everything. And as soon as I saw that they were doing that, I immediately hopped on board. I reached out to Asylum and was like, hey, I don't know what you need from me. I don't know what you want me to do. I'm in.
Yeah.
And I told Bensky and I told Brady because they're two of the big faces of 3D print cares and immediately just put my printers to work. Because if you look at a map, and I want everybody at home to go do this because it'll make sense when you see it. I live in a very small town in Northeast Tennessee called Mount Carmel. It is about 45 minutes north of where 26 was absolutely washed out by Hurricane Helene. And it's in a town that I go to fairly often. So when I saw what kind of devastation happened to this part of the country, I immediately was like, I need to do something. I saw 3D Print Cares doing a movement and was like, that I can do.
Yeah.
I ended up pledging 100 prints, which they wanted things like roughly the size of your palm, and I have mildly big hands. So
Yeah.
it took a week for my printers to crank out 100 of those. And then I just spent 3 or 4 days blasting all of the different Discord channels I was in. I made a TikTok that I had people messaging me, and they're like, wow, I wasn't expecting to cry on a video on your
Oh.
channel. Thanks for that. And I ended up having probably like 20 or 30 of my friends all climb on board because I just started seeing them all pile into Asylum Life's Discord and being like, I'm in, I'm pledging 100. And I'm friends with Jeremy and Keela from Lemery 3D over on
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
and kind of TikTok, but their home's definitely YouTube.
Yeah.
And I texted them and was like, hey, can I post this in your Discord? And they were like, go for it. And so I did. And then they turned right around and had 300 prints that they had for something else that
Wow.
they immediately just moved over to that and donated. So I did not expect people to all jump on board like that. But once I got everything done printing there, and I'm waiting to see where I need to ship those because right now, go sign up, but don't sign up right now because they've been flooded. I'm
Yeah.
waiting to see where to send those, and I'm right back to printing stuff for the craft fair.
I meant to go check this morning to see if it was still active. Last week when I was talking to Josh, he had mentioned it, and I looked, and at that point, I don't think that they were accepting more. I don't think they are now, but 3D print cares, it's crazy how much just since the first time that everything launched with that, how many prints went out, how many people, whether they were businesses who do this full time or whether just hobbyists, how many people were so willing to do that. And I think that's a really cool thing about 3D printers in general is like, not everybody can always afford to donate money or donate different things to charities when terrible things like this happen. But I think when it comes to 3D printing, it's something where almost everybody can donate 10 prints or however many prints that they're going to do. And so many people have been willing to help with that. So it's been really cool seeing just what they've done with that. And I'm excited to see how it goes from here.
I think the last time I saw an update on it, it was like Asylum said that he wanted 40 to 60 people on board and wanted 1,000 prints. And then he was like, the number was way over 100 people. I think it was like 120 something and over
Yeah.
6,100 prints ready to go. I love this community.
Yes. Yeah, no, I always say it's such a great group of people, and whether it's great from how people help from like a charity standpoint, great from going to a conference, and like you said, you can nerd out with people and everybody's equally excited as you. It's so many facets of it that it's great from. So it's really cool to see that. For you, I know we talked about what has happened over the last couple of weeks with your print, but any projects for you in the back of your mind that are on the horizon that maybe are like that 1D project that you've always really wanted to tackle, but you just haven't had the time to do it yet?
I have a project, and I know some of my friends that would steal that idea, so I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but I'll give
Okay.
you a hint. I have a profile for my V400 where I can print Legos, and they're actually tolerant to work with real Legos, and I will say nothing more.
I'm excited to see the future of how that project comes out. I will say I've dabbled before in printing Legos, and it's something that it sounds like it would be such a simple thing, but it is not. It's actually very difficult. Yeah.
The whole reason that I underwent the CPAP mod for my V400 was to print Legos. I needed better cooling for bridging, so I tore that printer apart and dumped like $120 worth of stuff into it just to make it print Legos better.
Definitely a valid reason to be upgrading your printers. Is there anybody in 3D printing that maybe when you first got into it, or maybe still to this day, that you just like really enjoy watching their projects, or that kind of like inspires you in 3D printing?
It's everybody.
Yeah.
Come on now. To go off on another side tangent, as far as people go, the infamous group chat with Bensky and Brady and Priority 3D, Mike, Nick, and Josh from Dork Vader, they invited me into that because I had been friends with, so it's nice to have that space where we can all just sit there and talk to one another and bounce ideas off of each other. We have created a space where if we come up with an idea for something and we're like, I'm going to bounce this off of you, and it's a bad idea, we go, no, that's freaking stupid. Don't do that. But I love you. Or if you
Yeah.
say something that's like out of pocket, it's you're an idiot. Love you though. And
Yeah.
I feel so thankful to have that little kind of community, pocket community of people that I can always count on to keep me entertained. And if I'm having a bad day, I can talk to them and just get out of the funk. But it's weird. And I had made a video on it where I was on my way to 3D Printopia and I was listening to Bensky and Brady's podcast, basically us. And I had queued it up to where I could binge watch all of their episodes, and then I could binge watch all of the episodes that you had that were in my back catalog. And I was like, she follows me. I can message her feedback if I wanted to. Or Bensky and Brady, I have Bensky's number. I could text him and be like, hey, that hot take you had about the Force is dumb, but I love you though. And I was thinking of all the creators and people in this community and really got like bad imposter syndrome because I'm like, I've only been doing this for a year. And all of these people that when I first started 3D printing, I was following them and I was watching them are now friends of mine. And then I got it again when I go to Printopia and Joel Telling, the 3D printing nerd, is there. And he was like, hey, it's nice to meet you. What was your username again? And like, he follows me now. And I had questions about a printer that he has. And he was like, do you live anywhere close to, I'm not going to say where he lives. And I was like, no, unfortunately I don't. I live on the opposite end of the country. And he was like, oh, because I would just let you go borrow it. And I was like, they say don't meet your heroes, but you're safe. And it's wild to see how, like, you get into this community and you watch these people and you start learning from them. And as long as you're just not a huge jerk, this community welcomes you with open arms and you can make friends with just about anybody. I've followed you since I started 3D printing and here I am on your podcast. I'm nerding out a little bit about it because it's awesome.
Likewise from my side. It's really cool talking to so many different people out here. I watch your content and it's crazy to think that you've only been 3D printing for a year. I don't think anybody watching your content would think that. That's one of my favorite things, just hearing people's backstories and hearing how long people have been doing it. There's people that I started watching their content I've looked up to in terms of 3D printing. And then I talk to them on here. They're like, yeah, I've been doing this for about a year. I'm like, absolutely crazy. I think it's something, I'm sure it's not the only type of hobby where it's like this, but I really will say in terms of 3D printing, not to keep circle jerking 3D printers, it really is something where even the biggest creators in 3D printing, I feel they're just the coolest people and so willing to help. And you might think that because they have so much going on that they, give somebody the time of day, but yeah, just a really cool group of people. So.
Everybody expects them to have the celebrity vibe. And it's, oh, I'm more important than you because I have so many followers. But every single person that I've met has been like, you like 3D printers? I like 3D printers. And it's such a great community to be a part of. And it's fun to help people and it's fun to meet people. And it's strange the friends you meet along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, with all that said, it has been so interesting talking to you today, just hearing all about the different things that you have going on, your different projects, your crazy Delta 3D printer that nobody else seems to have. For people who are not following you right now and would like to follow you, where can they find you online?
Typically, I can be found at Twin Shepherd Printing on TikTok. I'm starting to try to figure out what I'm doing with Instagram, but TikTok's the main place that you can find me and interact with me. And if you're on Discord, you can usually find me hanging out over on the New Makers Discord. So if you ever wanted to shoot me a direct message or just interact with me, it's here on my second monitor. It's been open the entire time you and I have been talking. So yeah.
Awesome. Jack, I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate you talking us through everything. And with that said, that is Meet the Makers.